Okay, good morning to everyone. My voice is not what it should be, so please forgive me an occasional cough. I suffered from a bit of a cold last week and it hasn't fully recovered yet. No, I'm fine, thank you. For those of you who look at this title and think that I'll be explaining what mandates are coming up, I have to disappoint you a little bit. That's not the intent of this presentation. So if that's what you were looking for, you can go straight to lunch. Otherwise, I invite you to stay here a little bit longer. It's going to be a bit of a tutorial today. But, the reason why I give this presentation to you is because we've received numerous questions on can we get deviations from this or alleviations from that. And I think it's good to take this opportunity to explain to you a little bit about the regulatory structure, Commission regulations, EASA specifications, certification specifications, EASA acceptable means of compliance, and how we can deviate from those. And that's different for each and every level. And then at the very end, it's kind of an encore. I'll give you a summary of regulatory activities. So in Europe, we do have a regulatory structure that's layered. We have Commission regulations at the highest level. And below that, there is what we call soft law, which are, for example, our certification specifications. And then one layer below that, as you know, is the acceptable means of compliance and our guidance material. I don't think I'm telling anything new here. It's just a reminder. Commission regulations, or implementing rules, as they're called, these are hard law. And contrary to what many people think, these are not EASA mandates. Occasionally, we're involved in drafting these, but in other cases, these regulations have been written with the support of Eurocontrol, SGU, CESAR, other organizations. Because it is a commission level regulation and it is hard law, we cannot grant any deviations from any commission regulation. Please keep this in mind. The only entities who can do so are the member states, and the only way they can do so is under the flexibility provisions for Article 71 of our basic regulation. So if you're late, for example, for a mandate, or if you have issues getting the aircraft certified in time, you have to go to your national aviation authority. They can grant you the exemptions. We can't. Now, there are some caveats there. The member states or the national aviation authorities will have to inform the Commission and us and all other member states immediately when they grant a deviation. So it's not a very easy process, but it's the only process that is available to deviate from from the Commission regulations. Excuse me. Certification specifications, CSS, are published by us. That's done through an executive director decision. And we provide criteria in the certification specifications that ensure compliance with the Commission regulations. These CSs are considered soft law, which means that we have the authority to grant deviations, alternate means to comply, etc., etc. Now we can do this, but there are again some criteria. Compliance with the requirements of Annex 2 of the basic regulation, and these are the essential requirements for airworthiness, still need to be met. So if your deviation proposes something, or your exemption proposes something that deviates from or that doesn't comply with the Annex 2 criteria, then we can't do anything. Sorry. The other caveat is it needs to be subject to a public consultation. Now bear this in mind, that's a lengthy process. That could easily add a couple of months to your application or to the processing of your application before you get the approval. And thereafter, we need to publish it as either a deviation, an equivalent safety, I should say that differently. It's not correct here. I think we call it an equivalent safety finding these days, or a special condition. Whether it's a deviation or a special condition, that depends on whether you comply with the intent of the rule or not, or whether there are other mitigations. That varies with each request. Now, those were the baselines. I'm going to use ADSB, which is, I think, a recent or an upcoming mandate, as an example to give you a few examples of how we deal with these kind of things. So we have Commission Regulation 1207/2011, which was later amended, and it essentially says all aircraft flying IFR as general air traffic in Europe need to comply, need to have ADSB 1090 extended squitter by June 7, 2020. Again, this is a Commission regulation, so we cannot grant deviations. If you have troubles getting the aircraft certified and the systems installed on time, you need to go to your NAA. Now, the note here is important. We have advised the Commission to make some changes to the exemption policy, to be a little bit more flexible. I can't share with you the details of that advice because it's internal between us and the Commission. And the decision is also with the Commission. And we hope to have a decision sometime by June this year, but that depends on their planning, their workload. So it's out of our hands, but at least we have tried to come a little bit, we've stuck our neck out a little bit to try to help you, to help the operators as well. The other example is one where we deviate from a CS, a certification specification. Excuse me. CS, ACNS has two occasions where we have a requirement to meet continuity criteria, and we have set those as a remote. This was the result of a long discussion between us and Eurocontrol. If you look at the Commission regulation, there is a continuity requirement there as well, which is 2 × 10⁻⁴, which is less than the remote and easier to demonstrate compliance with. Now, some applicants have come to us and said, we have difficulties complying with the remote case. In many cases, we've been able to resolve that without having to go to a deviation. But in some cases, that was not an option. So since this was ACS, it was our document, we did a public consultation, and this was followed by a publication of the deviation allowing alleviation from the CS on our website. So if you have troubles meeting those criteria, we have the means to address those. At the AMC level, it's a little bit easier still. And this is an example for the AMC. We have an AMC that states, and there were good reasons to state this, that the criteria or that the data that had to be transmitted or that is transmitted by the ADSB unit is the same data that is used by the flight crew to operate the aircraft. The reason for this was that we believed that in case of issues or questions, it would be helpful if the controller could contact the pilots, the flight crew, and the flight crew could actually assess yes or no. We're seeing this error as well, we're dealing with it. Or in any case, the flight crew would be aware of what's being transmitted. Sometimes, because of older equipment, there was another AMC that made it difficult to comply because we put down additional performance criteria on the GNSS receiver. And even if you had an ETSO or TSO, those performance criteria weren't always met. And lastly, when the FAA published their criteria, there was general interpretation that their criteria require the installation of an SPAS receiver. Now, that's one interpretation. It's not the interpretation that I always share, but generically that's what's considered acceptable by the FAA. Because of the previous considerations, it would become a rather expensive change for many operators. You're not easily going to swap your MMRs on the aircraft just to do ADS-B, just to comply with the ADS-B rule. So there were applicants coming to us and asking if we could allow a remote GNSS sensor to be installed. Now, a remote GNSS sensor is a separate unit. It's got its own antenna. And the only purpose of that sensor is to feed the ADS-B unit with GNSS data. That's it. It's not going to help the pilots navigate. It's not going to be visible necessarily to the pilots. And so we had an issue with that previous AMC that we discussed that said that all data that's being transmitted must be visible to the flight crew. Now, we took the questions, we thought about it, we had a few discussions, and we came up with a few criteria that allowed the installation of a remote sensor. And the main criterion is really that it should be an SPAS receiver, because the SPAS receiver, the additional integrity that is provided by SPAS, helps us reach a similar level of integrity as when the information comes from the systems that the pilots are using. There are certain conditions that apply. Again, we have a CRE. And meanwhile, we have also published our position on the website under the FAQ for ADS-B certification. Now, as the anchor, I'm giving you a few updates, or an update on our regulatory activities. CS25, as you know, we're doing annual updates. Quite a few of those updates affect avionics, and in this year's edition, that also affects AMC 2511. So you'd be interested to have a look at that. CS ACNS, I'm proud to say we've just published issue number 2 after 5 years of work on the navigation aspect. And we're soon expecting to be adding criteria on GNSS, that's requirements for aircraft in distress. CS10, on the lower end of the scheme, this is for the low-end GA. We've just published issue 2. We found a few issues there with the issue that we have just published, and we're looking at possibly issuing a CM to provide corrections to that. And then there's a few NPAs that are still in progress. 2018-06 CS AWO, that's all weather operations. We're still educating the comments. That process is still ongoing. And as of today, I don't have a date for publication yet that has been confirmed. The same is essentially true for NPA 2018-12. That's the runway overrun awareness and alerting system. We're still working that. The plan is for a new implementing rule for changes to Part 26, CS26, and CS25 to be introduced in phases between, I think, the third quarter of this year and the first quarter of 2021. So keep an eye on our website, make sure that you follow what's going on there, because this is a change that's going to affect essentially all the large aircraft that are being produced today, and a number of large aircraft that will come into service after a certain date following the publication of the implementing rule. There's one NPA that I missed here in the list, which is 2018-03 on the recorders. Again, we received quite a few comments. It's quite a difficult topic, and we have been struggling internally as well with it. Again, I don't have a publication date as of yet, but be assured we're working on it, and we hope to have that published soon. And finally, there are some certification memoranda. CMAS 10 on FLARM has just been published. That took quite a while as well. We had some difficult discussions both internally and difficulties addressing the comments that we received. We're also working on the CMAS 009 on databases. That's in internal review following an external consultation. And we're developing a new CMAS, and we don't know the number yet, on multi-frequency for data link. That's something to correct an anomaly in our CS-ACNS. The Commission regulation there, if you interpret it correctly, indicates that you need to have multi-frequency. We somehow missed that in our CS-ACNS, and we're correcting that in our CMAS, or our new CM. And I think that's it. So thank you very much. Are there any questions, or do you just want to go to lunch?
Yes, we have some questions. Yes, there is the okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I have the great pleasure to have our head of large aeroplane department joining at the desk, especially because we have one question that is coming each and every year. I was waiting for it, so thank you, Mr. Clementi. And the question is the following one: how can I get aware of existing special conditions or equivalent safety findings? So it's a generic question, I would say, about availability of the CRE and visibility of the CRE, which are raised by EASA. So I will let Ludovic answer this question.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Nicolas. So I'm happy to join. Sorry, I could not join earlier. So to answer this question, indeed, today, although it's not an ideal solution to search for those kind of information, we have on our website, we publish all special conditions, equivalent safety findings, and also the deviations, temporary deviations or permanent deviations that are unprecedented. So whenever it's the first time we have such special condition, ESF or deviation, we publish them on our website. It's not very user friendly. We're aware that the way to find them is not ideal. I'm afraid that the easiest way to find them is through a Google search for the moment. But apart from that problem that we are trying to solve, normally we have been doing that for many years now, so all should be there. It doesn't mean that it's generic documents that would apply in every case, in every situation. On top of that, of course, we have done a lot of efforts in the past years to try to put some of the key documents attached to TCDS as annex to TCDS whenever there are important CREs associated to design. But what comes very regularly as a question is whether EASA could make available a general repository of all existing generic ESF or deviation and special condition. And I had already the opportunity last year to express our policy on that matter. So what we are investing is more on our ability to translate these documents into the proper regulatory framework, meaning that This special condition, ESF, and deviation should, whenever they start to be relatively generic. I don't like the word generic because they are always related to a specific design, unfortunately. You all have specific specificities in your design that makes it not completely generic, but what we try to do is to put them into the CS25 when relevant, and we are investing in making that more effective, quicker, to happen quicker. So we have 2 revisions of CS25 per year, and this makes it effective in introducing from 5 to 10 special condition ESF or deviations per year whenever they have become generic. We are also investing in cert memo for some of them, because when we consider that it's not a material for CS, we can put it in a CM. So this is where we invest, and rather than publishing a repository of CREs. So it's just a policy. I just would like to comment on the fact that also introducing on the contrary, very too quickly this special condition, ESF and deviation into the CS 25 or 23 or 27, 29 has some drawbacks if the material is not mature enough to cover a wide scope of common design. It could make it specific too early. The other drawback is that we become unharmonized with the FAA or with TCCA, so this is something also that it's not desirable for you. So we try to find the right balance, and I hope that we can achieve it. So
thank you very much. This was a very complete answer. So the next question will be more for Hete. So Cyrus Liu from Austro Control is asking whether the CRE called Remote GNSS Sensor for ADSB is still active with CSSENS at issue 2.
And the answer is yes. We have been able to address a few items in issue 2 of the CSSENS, but the main topic was the inclusion of the new navigation part. We are looking, however, just like we do with CS25, at a regular at possibilities to do a regular update of CSSENS. That's something that we are discussing internally, and hopefully that will help us address some of these issues more quickly than we can today.
Thank you. I think we have time for a couple of other questions, but afterwards we go to lunch break. Don't worry, everyone is probably already looking at the clock. So Mr. Sbidi has asked if it's necessary for ADSB out new design to demonstrate compliance of ELS EHS to CSSENS, so especially for aircraft which are already compliant to TGL 13.
When we talk about ADSB out, we didn't have any previous criteria that comply with the Commission regulation. We did have AMC 2024, obviously. That, however, that standard does not comply with the Commission regulation. The only standard or the only criteria that do comply are in CSSENS. So the answer is yes, you have to go to CSSENS. Now, obviously, if your airplane is already compliant to TGL 13 or AMC 20-13, we can give credit for that. So you enter a lighter certification process. But again, we have no other material available for ADSB out for aircraft that need to comply with the Commission regulation than those that we have in CSSENS.
Okay. Cyrus Liu, can you please take the microphone and ask your question about Article 71? I'm not sure from the formulation if I would really be able to make it correctly.
Okay. It's very simple. When the member state starts with the Article 71 process, it's unclear at this moment what EASA position will be. And after a while, we might receive a position from EASA which is completely in contrary to the granted exemption, which brings up some further discussions. And in most cases, we are forced to keys the exemption again.
So my response for that would be, I understand that NAs have difficulties granting these exemptions. They'd like to know what the EASA position is in that case. My suggestion at this point would be to contact us up front and seek our concurrence with the deviation, and then hopefully that should avoid discussions afterwards.
Ludovic, you want to complete or no?
Fully agree with Hete.
Okay, perhaps the last one, Mr. Franz Redak. For runway overrun system, Part 26 and CS25 were mentioned. To which extent will the CS25 be an issue? What is the intended retroactive implementation time is a complementary question.
So, from what I know, but I'm not directly involved in this process, we're not looking at retrofitting. We are looking though at requiring aircraft, after a given date, with the CFA that is issued after a given date, that need to be compliant, and that's going to go into Part 26. Now, CS20, the other part of the question, to which extent is CS25 an issue here? My understanding is that there's going to be a new CS25.705 that provides, the technical criteria for the installation of a runway overrun awareness and alerting system.